back inside the firebox here again, and you can now see that full penetrating weld has been completed on both the left and the right hand side sheets, across the top and down each of the sides. Our next step then is to begin to remount these stay bolt holes for the final fitting of the stay bolts, once we have those funds raised to purchase them, install them, and weld them into place.
On the center thermic siphon, there appeared to be a blister that had been welded and patched over. We decided to completely cut that old repair out and replace it with a brand new section, which is now currently being fabricated. We expect this repair to be complete sometime in February. The power reverse mechanism was removed, so that way we can inspect it, lap the valve, test it, and then clean it and paint it before reinstalling it back onto the locomotive. Disassembly of the stoker mechanism began in February, along with the checking and cleaning of the removed parts. While in good shape, we did notice some wear due to an improperly spaced drive gear, as well as some repairs that will be needed to the auger.
Everyone, I'm standing here in front of our power reverse unit, which has been completely refurbished, successfully tested, beautifully painted, and ready to be reinstalled back onto the 2100. Everybody, up above me, the outer side sheet sections that we had to create due to some slight cracking have now been made, drilled out, and have been welded into place.
We have begun reaming the stay bolt holes. When the stay bolt holes were initially drilled, they were done slightly undersized, so that after the new inner side sheets were welded into place, the final hole size can be reamed properly, aligning it to the outer sheet. This process requires a crew of 3 and will take approximately 20 hours to complete. The new thermic siphon section has been formed and welded into place. Since this section is not supported by stay bolts, it will need to be x-rayed prior to the hydro test to ensure the completeness of the weld.
The final reaming of the 554 stay bolt holes through the outer sheet and the inner sheet has been completed. After the reaming of the 554 stay bolt holes was complete, some cleanup work needed to be done, and 2 of our new members, Tim and Eileen, performed that service. Our volunteers completed the cleaning and polishing of the rods in preparation for the final measurements that will be taken by our professional contractor. The power reverse unit was installed back onto the locomotive. The main auger has been removed from the stoker, and our volunteers began work preparing it for repairs to be done. The riveting process on the mud ring is done, so let's go take a look at how that was accomplished. First, the rivets had to be cut to specific lengths. Several different lengths were needed between 6 3/8 of an inch and 7 inch. This ensures that a proper head size is formed. Next, the rivets are heated until the desired temperature is reached. Just like cooking on a grill at home, the rivets are moved and turned to ensure a consistent temperature is reached throughout. It takes an experienced person who knows when the rivet is ready based on the color of the heated metal. Then, the rivet is positioned in the hole, with the shank part on the outside. It takes 2 men, one on the inside of the firebox and one on the outside, to form the rivet heads. This entire process took a total of 5 people 2 days to drive the 112 rivets. Also in April, work was done to the bell and its mechanical mechanism. Our volunteers also continued the prep work of cleaning and grinding the auger, in preparation for the weld repairs that need to be made. Repair work continues on the auger, including welding of cracks, building up of worn areas, and replacing worn or corroded bolts and pins. The stoker housing sections were stripped, inspected, and painted. The stoker drive shaft bearing surfaces were honed out. Removed the worn out wooden front pilot steps to use them as a template to have new ones made. Additionally, the metal base plates beneath those steps were stripped and painted. The stoker motor was inspected and then tested on air. One of the items we were able to do was change the threads on the lower mud ring.
so that way we could reinstall the brackets for the cover plates on the ash pans. One of the main projects we got done as well is hanging the bell back on the locomotive. Now, we're still waiting for parts to come in for the clapper assembly, but we expect that to be done within the next 2 weeks, so that way the bell can be connected back up with air and tested. Work still continues on the auger with doing weld repairs, so that way the cracks that were there are now all filled in, as well as any sections that were broken out have now been built back up. And then, of course, we will continue on the grinding to make the auger part nice and round and smooth again. We also needed to build up the thickness on some of the blade parts as well. And one of the other tasks that was able to be accomplished was our good friends here at the Midwest Railway Preservation Society relocated the tender for us up by the turntable. So that way we can have a company come in and pump the remaining oil out of the bunker, have Midwest come in with their crane and lift the bunker out of the tender, and have our volunteers begin to do work on the tender.
Wood for the front pilot steps was cut, drilled, painted, and installed onto the front pilot. The remaining 600 gallons of fuel oil was removed from the oil bunker. Homan Oil Company brought an antique tanker truck to hold the oil as it was being pumped out. Additionally, the brackets that held the oil bunker into place have been removed, so that way we can have our good friends at the Midwest Railway Preservation Society use their crane to lift the oil bunker out of the tender. From time to time, television production crews utilize the Midwest Railway Preservation Society's site and equipment for upcoming TV program shoots. This time, they also needed a steam locomotive, and Midwest passed American Steam Railroad's information along to them. We gladly accepted, and over 2 Saturdays in July, prepped the front of the locomotive and painted it, so that way it could appear as an operating locomotive. Watch for more information from us about this upcoming TV special so you can watch for it. And speaking of paint, on the tender the word Ferraquis, which was Latin for iron horse, as well as the other lettering and numbering on the back of the tender and reflective tape on the side, were removed by the American Steam Volunteers.
The main project that was accomplished in August was the removal of the 5,000-gallon oil bunker from the tender. It is nice to have friends with cranes, and Steve Corpus of the Midwest Railway Preservation Society expertly lifted and maneuvered the bunker with ease. The entire process took only about 10 minutes. With the oil bunker removed, we were pleased that the coal bunker looks to be in overall good shape. ASR volunteers will begin removing the old bunker's angle support brackets and wooden shims, as they will no longer be needed. We will remove any surface rust in areas and prep them for painting, as well as to fabricate and install a new tender deck plate and stoker trough cover plate. The tender also received new rear wooden footboards, which were made and installed by ASR volunteers. In August, we also got back to some running gear projects, with checking the rods for straightness and brasses for wear, and the main driver axles for proper alignment. Our professional running gear contractor spent 2 days with ASR performing these services. Once completed, ASR will have documented which rods will need straightening, if any rod brasses need machining or replacement, and any tramming that will need to be performed to ensure all is in proper alignment. In the firebox, volunteers checked for any remaining burrs in the stay-bolt holes and removed the razor-sharp edge from where the stay-bolt holes were reamed. Our big September project was preparing for our fundraising banquet featuring keynote speaker Ross Rowland, who provided insight and interesting stories along with dozens of photos and video clips about the many steam locomotives he has owned or operated, including Reading T1's 2100, 2101, and 2102. Ross also presented to an enthusiastic audience his plans for American Freedom Train 2.0, which he also proclaimed his intent to have 2100 be used for one of the segments. For those American Steam Railroad members who are not able to attend, we will be sharing some of his T1 and American Freedom Train stories in our next newsletter. We want to extend our thanks to our wonderful friends at the Midwest Railway Preservation Society who spent many hours with ASR cleaning, preparing, staffing, and moving the 2100's tender and their Mikado number 4070 inside the roundhouse to ensure guests had a great steam-filled evening. We took advantage of the nice weather and began to work on the tender, including needle cleaning the buffer as well as the wedge key that holds it in place. These items were then painted and installed into the pocket. Temporarily, we used a piece of all thread to hold the wedge in place, which will later be replaced with a proper grade 8 bolt. Work continued with removing the oil bunker support brackets in preparation to fabricate the new brackets, as well as the stoker's trough side and slide plates. The Bell's new air actuator was installed, and the Bell tested. Cleaning of the eccentric rods was done. The remaining cylinder cock valves have been cleaned and inspected, with 3 of them needing additional work due to damage to the spring pin inserts on the housings that allow the exhaust port angle to be positioned and fixed in place. The cylinder barrels and piston rods were polished, and a light coating of oil or grease applied to protect them. The front pilot was removed, as the front pilot truck will need to be rolled out to allow Timken to inspect one of the roller bearings, which had some rust present. The corroded auger bolts that could not be pressed out have been drilled so as to allow for them to be torched out and then replaced with new grade 8 bolts.
Both left and right firebox side sheet gaps have been measured for proper stay bolt lengths, so we can begin cutting the material for the 554 stay bolts that need to be made. All of the old grease and lubricants have been removed from the crosshead guides, and the crosshead guides, and the linkage has been cleaned and polished. Work continues on the stoker auger to build up thin areas and to repair any cracks. The front smokebox plate bolts were loosened, and the main smokebox plate slightly open to check for clearances as we make preparations to reconstruct the front end components for coal burn.